On today's show, we have two-time Stephen Leacock Medal winner for Humour from Canada. If you want to know about writing humor and his latest book, stay tuned. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Scott Patton. This is Books Cafe, sponsored by free-ebooks.net. And today's guest is a very special guest. They're all because I've known him for a number of years. He's won awards for humor in Canada. He's a best-selling international author, and his debut novel, The Best Laid Plans, in 2008, won the 2008 Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor and was crowned the 2011 winner of CBC Canada Reads as the essential Canadian novel of the decade. So with that, let's welcome our guest, Terry Fallis. Hey, Terry, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm really excited to have you on because we've known each other for a number of years, and you always have great stories. And I'd like to just start with a quick back to the future or secret origin story. How did you get started writing?
Oh, that's a great question. How long is the show, Scott? How I got started writing? Well, I decided when I was quite late in life. I was about 45 when I first thought about writing a novel. Well, I'd wanted to for many years, but I just finally got around to doing it when I was 45. And I wrote this satirical novel of Canadian politics, and not a topic that any sane individual would write if they'd hoped to be published. Turns out not that many publishers were interested in a satirical novel of Canadian politics. So after spending a year trying to get literary agents or publishers to take some interest in it, I decided that, I didn't even get a single rejection letter. I hadn't made a big enough impression on the traditional publishing establishment to generate an automated rejection letter. So I decided to self-publish the novel, and to build an audience for it, I knew I'd have to because I didn't have a publisher behind me. Even before it was self-published, when I was going through the self-publishing process, I actually decided to podcast the entire novel, chapter by chapter, and give it away for free on iTunes. And this was back in January of 2007. So podcasting was really in its infancy then, but that's what I did. And I got lots of positive comments from people around the world, strangely, who stumbled upon it. And it was their comments that really gave me the resolve to go ahead and self-publish it. That maybe I had written a novel. And so I self-published it. And it was that self-published novel that I entered it myself in the Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humor. It's sort of the equivalent of the Mark Twain Prize in the US. It's one of our oldest literary awards in Canada, and somehow miraculously it won, and that had a life-changing effect on my life as a writer. I immediately landed a literary agent, and we immediately signed with McClelland Stewart, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House here in Canada. And I've been with Penguin Random House now and McClelland Stewart for all 8 of my novels. So it all started with that first one that was self-published. Humble beginnings, but I'm happy. I feel very fortunate.
So we need to make sure that we never quit. I think that would be a part of your story too, right? You found
I think so. Perseverance and some creativity and a lot of luck, serendipity. So I feel very lucky.
Cool. And now you've got 8 books, and you've just launched, or is that the right word? Launched a new book?
That's right. Yes. In fact, I happen to have it right here, Scott. This is my reading copy because I've been doing so many. I know. What a coincidence. Well, I do so many Zoom events now that it sits here right on my desk, and I do talks and readings about the book. Yeah, Operation Angus. It came out at the end of August 31st, and has been doing quite well out of the gate. Very, very happy. I've done many events, and we had a launch event. And this novel actually picks up from my first and second novels. I've gone back to those characters from, well, it was 11 years ago that they last appeared in a novel of mine. So I've decided to revisit them and to give them another adventure, and we had lots of fun with it.
Oh, that's exciting. So, can you give us a synopsis, or actually,
Sure.
what we've never done? We have never ever done a reading. So I don't want to do like a 3-hour reading, but I'm just wondering if you could read a little bit of the book.
Sure.
That would be
Why don't
exciting.
I'm happy to do that. I'll read you the first half of the novel, Scott, and no, I won't do that. But let me just set it up. It's called Operation Angus, and Angus is the name of the protagonist, not the narrator, but the sort of the key figure. His name is Angus McClintock, and he is a reluctant politician. He was elected against all odds. He didn't even want to be elected, but he was somehow, really because he's very honest and principled, and the voters in his constituency decided to take a chance on somebody who had no political experience, but who was honest and ethical, and to see what havoc that might wreak in the halls of Parliament here in Canada. So as this novel opens, he is the Minister of State for International Relations, and he and his sidekick, Daniel Addison, who is the narrator of the novel, he's his chief of staff, they're in London for meetings about the summit meeting that's coming up, the G8 summit in Washington. But there's another meeting that's happening in Ottawa, Canada's capital. On his way home from the summit, the Russian president is going to be stopping for a one-day meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister. And that's what Angus and Daniel are helping to organize. So they're in London, England. And this is kind of a comic spy story, a comic thriller of sorts. It's not just a political satire. It's I venture into the thriller realm. So there's a lot going on in this story, including a disgruntled MI6 agent and an assassination attempt on the Russian president's life. And Angus and Daniel have to race the clock to thwart this attempt. So I'm happy just to read you a couple of pages from the beginning of the novel. Angus is a Scottish emigre, so he's been in Canada for 20 years or something, but he still has a Scottish accent. So Daniel is the narrator. An MI6 agent just asked me to meet her in an hour at a pub around the corner, I blurted out. And, well, and what, man? Angus asked. You're seeking advice on what to wear or who should pay? He stood in the doorway, decked out in pajama bottoms and a white t-shirt that proclaimed, Hovercraft lovers do it on air. Angus has a hovercraft. By the look of him, he'd been sound asleep when I knocked. Mind you, whether in the House of Commons or his boathouse workshop day or night, his long hair and beard almost always looked as if he'd just driven through a hurricane in a convertible. Well, I don't really know. I guess I just wanted to tell somebody that I'm meeting a secret agent in a London pub late at night for a clandestine meeting, I replied. Well, Daniel, lad, by my reckoning, if you're saying that out loud in a hotel corridor, you haven't quite grasped the fundamentals of the spy game. Did she actually use the words clandestine meeting? Well, no, I guess I'm just projecting, given the circumstances and all. Well, you'd better come in. I'm bleeding awake now, and this hallway is not the venue for a conversation about MI6. Well, sorry, Angus, it's still early. I figured you wouldn't quite be asleep yet. After the day we had, I'm knackered. Nothing is quite so enervating as an interminable and mind-numbing meeting where people talk too much but say too little. All right then, lad, from the top, Angus said as he collapsed on his bed. Well, 10 minutes ago, which would have been at 2050, I began in my most authoritative voice, but stopped when Angus lifted one eyebrow so high it threatened to break free from his forehead. What? I asked. 2050? Have you joined the military? I'm just trying to bring some clarity to the story's details and avoid any confusion. It just sounds a tad pretentious, and I fear it would soon be annoying. Annoying? Well, I don't know why. I've only been doing it since 2100, I said, checking my watch. Besides, I'm really just trying to get into the spirit of the evening. They always use the 24-hour clock in spy novels. James Bond never arrives 12 hours late for a secret rendezvous because MI6 uses the 24-hour clock. Oh, sorry, lad, did you say something? I must have drifted back to sleep there. Now, can you move the sheep into the shearing pen with a wee bit more alacrity? Of course, but I don't know why we have to bring sheep into this. Anyway, the text came into my personal cell phone, not my government-issued mobile. So the message was clean, off the grid, and off the books. Well, who are you spouting now? Tom Clancy or that Ludlum lad? Suffering, Daniel, get to the point. Okay, so here's the text. And I read, I was in the briefing with you today, the no longer young woman seated on the far side of the room from you and saying nothing. I'm MI6. Please meet me at 2200 at the Copper Cup Pub, back corner table, dark blue dress. It's important, strictly confidential, and very unofficial. While frightfully cliche, tell no one and do come alone. Well, I didn't know how we're going to find you a dark blue dress to wear in the next hour. I think that's what she's going to be wearing. Ye gods, Daniel, can you not tell when I'm having you on? Right, sorry, I'm a little nervous and maybe a little excited. So where is this Copper Cup? I've not heard of it. I Googled it. It's just around the corner from here. She must know where we're staying. Daniel, she's MI6. She probably knows what you had for breakfast and the brand of underwear you favor. And one thing's certain, you'll not be going on your own, a lamb to the slaughter. I'll be your... Angus snapped his fingers in search of the right word. Watson? No, not him. Robin to my Batman? Certainly not. Sancho Panza? Och, no, there'll be no tilting at windmills tonight. Wingman? And that's my final offer. That's it. Aye, wingman. I'll be your wingman. I wasn't sure a wingman was a good idea. On the other hand, two heads are better than one when venturing into uncharted waters. A paddle wouldn't hurt either. But her instructions were not to speak to anyone and to come alone. She might bolt if we both show up. No, I don't think so. Not if I arrive after you've already sat down. Besides, a few fingers of single malt would aid a smooth return to the horizontal when we get back here. I replied to her text, agreeing to meet her. Then Angus and I cooked up a plan, or at least the pale imitation of something that approached the impression of a hazy semblance of a plan. And Scott, why don't I stop there before the fireworks start?
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to read the book now.
Good. That's the idea.
So I'm kind of curious about your process, because we have a lot of new authors on the show, that watch the show and are on the site and putting their books up to grow their audience. Can you tell us a little bit about your process when it comes to your writing?
Sure. I'm an engineer by academic training. I have a degree in mechanical and biomedical engineering, though I've never practiced engineering for a single moment in my life. After I graduated, I went right into politics and then communications, public affairs consulting, and now I'm a writer. However, I write my novels the way you might expect an engineer to write novels. I view the entire world through an engineer's lens, even though I've never practiced engineering officially or professionally. So that means that I am an inveterate outliner. Engineers don't build bridges without blueprints. I don't build a novel without a blueprint. So if it takes me 18 months to write a novel, I'm not actually writing complete sentences until the last 4 months of that process. I spend the first 14 months or so cooking up the story, mapping it out, developing the characters. I have a chapter map where I detail what happens in each chapter so I can move things around and assess the cadence and the rhythm, the pacing of the novel. And then I sort of blow out that chapter map with a bullet point chapter by chapter outline of the novel that runs to about 85 or 90 pages. So if you think about it, I have a about a 90-page bullet point version of the novel, chapter by chapter. And when I go through that, as I do over and over, looking for holes in the plot and looking for problems with timing and resolution of issues and peaks and valleys and that kind of thing, when I've made all the changes and it seems to hold together after multiple reviewings with nothing changing, it feels like I can then write the manuscript. So in the last 4 months of that process, I write the manuscript with my outline on one side of my screen and my manuscript on the other. So what it allows me to do is, when I'm writing the manuscript, it allows me to commit all of my questionable cerebral powers to the act of crafting sentences. No part of my brain is worried about what my character is going to do next, because I know what's happening next. I've known for months. I can really just focus on the writing and how to bring that story, that bullet point version, to life with the right words and the right order on the page. And I quite enjoy that part of the process, just working on the writing itself. Right. So that's how it's planning, and then writing in the home stretch. So it's a bit different from how most people do it, but that's what works for me.
So do you write chapter 1 first, chapter 2 second, or do you find you're on chapter 10 writing and then chapter 3 writing?
No, that's a good question, but I'm too much of an anally retentive engineer to leap ahead. I just work my way methodically through it, and what I do is I actually have a separate document for each chapter. So paranoid am I that I might lose everything if my computer crashes. So I only have one chapter at a time, sort of on the screen.
Right.
But I like that, and here's the other reason I like it for the aspiring writers, the rookie writers out there. I save it in a computer file, and when I open up that file, when I'm in the early going, I see there's chapter 1, there's the second document for chapter 2, there's chapter 3, and I keep working and I keep working, and this file fills up. Chapter 1, 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it really feels like you're achieving something. There's progress. The more documents piling up in your computer file there means that you're making progress. You're closing in on your goal. So my novels chapters are usually about between 4,500 and 6,000 words, which is about a half hour of reading time. So I have about anywhere from 16 to 20 chapters in my novels. So I know where I am in the novel when I see that computer file and there's, I'm up to chapter 6. Okay, I'm a third of the way through. And it gives me almost like a gauge of where I am progress-wise in the novel. Of course, at the end, I do have to assemble the novel. I have to bring in each of those chapters into a separate document. But that's a small price to pay for, I think, the benefits of doing it as separate chapter documents.
Right. Yeah, because there's nothing worse than losing your chapter.
Oh my gosh. It's actually, touch wood, it has never happened to me yet. So I'm praying it doesn't, but try to be very careful, because sometimes you write a chapter, go, that's great. I like it. It's perfect. The words are great. I love a couple of lines in there that I think will stand for all time. And if I lost it, I'm sure I couldn't recreate it in the same way. So I'm a bit paranoid about losing them.
In the early days of computers, I was visiting a friend of mine and we were chatting away, and he was in a cubicle, and then we heard this blood-curdling scream from the next cubicle, and the lady, we're like, what's wrong? And her computer was off, and she was working for 3 hours on, I think it was like a PowerPoint, and she was tapping her foot, and she tapped the power bar, turned off the power, and of course this was before auto save and all that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
She just
terrible.
Ready to cry.
Yeah, I've done that with work documents before. It's happened to me, and it's a nightmare. So I worry about it.
Yeah, we're so lucky. We don't seem to have that problem anymore, fortunately.
No, not in the same way. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. So let's take a few minutes and talk about some of your other books, Terry.
Sure.
Let me just bring up the screen here. I've got Operation Angus, and your first one was The Best Laid Plans, correct?
That's correct. That was my first one. The High Road was a follow-up. You can see that the covers are very similar. It was a follow-up, and after those two, I decided I didn't want to write another political satire. I wanted to see if I could write something else.
Right.
So I spent the next 7 or 11 years writing 5 more novels, all of them dealing with different issues, but certainly having some common elements. I have only ever written first-person narratives. They are all intended to be funny, but I'm dealing with different issues. That my third novel was Up and Down, and it sort of looks at a number of things: Canada-U.S. relations, discrimination on the basis of age, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and it tells the story of a PR guy, that's the narrator, who has NASA as a client. They're trying to rekindle public interest in the space program. And to do it, the PR guy suggests a citizen astronaut lottery. That, a lottery held in the United States and in Canada. There'd be 2 winners, one in each country, and they would have the chance to train for a shuttle flight. This is back when the shuttle was still around, and spend a week on the International Space Station. And of course, they're looking for the PR company in New York. The head office is looking for a Canadian winner who is, stereotypically, quintessentially Canadian, a lumberjack, good-looking guy with a lumberjack shirt, skates over his shoulder, and a hockey stick in one hand. And instead, it turns out to be a 71-year-old lesbian bush pilot doctor who lives in an isolated glacial lake in northern British Columbia. And the fun unfolds from there. So that was a lot of fun. That may be my favorite of my novels, actually. So the other ones deal with, one deals with feminism. My Poles Apart novel is a very pro-feminist novel. Lots of fun with that. One Brother Shy deals with a family trying to put a family back together. Identical twins who were separated at birth, and I happen to be an identical twin, though we were not separated at birth, Scott. But I had fun with that story, and that was the first time I'd written a narrator who was damaged. The narrator had a traumatic event happen to him in high school 10 years before the novel opens, and he's still dealing with the aftermath of that and trying to recover himself in a way. And so the novel's about that, and it's about tracking down the twin brother he didn't know he had until his mother died. So I cover a lot of different things. Albatross is my last novel before this one, and it's a story of a young man who is gifted at the game of golf. He has a body perfectly suited for golf. He'd never played golf in his life, not interested in sports, not interested in golf. But he just happens to have the perfectly proportioned body for golf, and he quickly becomes the Tiger Woods of his generation. But he had to give up so much to get there. He gave up his girlfriend, the love of his life. He gave up his dream of becoming a writer. And so it's a novel about figuring out what you love and doing that, not just what you're good at. Just being good at something doesn't mean it's what you're meant to do. So that's about sort of an examination of the tension that exists between success and happiness, because the two aren't equivalent. So I had fun with that.
That's a great philosophical point, Terry. You can be good at doing something, but that doesn't mean that's going to make you fulfilled or happy or live a good life. Right.
And that occurred to me when I started writing novels and realized, oh, this is what makes me happy.
Right.
Not that I was a great golfer.
When you talk about the books.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. So, wow, that's terrific. We're getting close to the end of our time together, Terry, and I wanted to ask you if you had uh, some words of wisdom, some tip for young authors that they, on those dark nights when they're we got writer's blocks, or on those sunny days when things are going well.
Right on. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for writers who are starting out. Sometimes there's a temptation to look at the publishing world and to figure out what's hot in a marketing sense. What books are flying off the shelves? For a while, it was vampire novels. And I once spoke to a writer who was just starting out, and they said, "Yes, I'm going to write a vampire novel." And I said, "Oh, why?" And she said, "Well, because that's what's really hot. That's what's really selling these days." And I said, "Oh, do you know anything about vampires?" "Well, no, not yet." "Have you ever read a vampire novel?" "No." "Do you like vampires?" No, not particularly." "Are you a vampire?" I asked all these questions, and she had absolutely no connection to the story at all. And I can tell you, I never sort of met her again. I don't know if she went ahead and finished that novel, but I bet the reader could tell that she had no real interest or connection to or passion for vampires. So even though it might be what's hot, I would always counsel young writers to write about something that seizes them. Write about something that they're obsessed with or passionate about or care deeply about or know something about or have experienced before. That will be a much truer, authentic novel than the one you write because you thought it might sell given marketing trends. I mean, I wrote a satirical novel of Canadian politics, and that worked out for me eventually. And I think it wouldn't have worked out if I'd written about something that was current or was the hot topic, the hot book that year. So that's one piece of advice anyway, Scott. I think it's good to write about something that you care about.
I think that's great advice, Terry. Thank you for sharing it. And yeah, it makes such a difference when it's a labor of love as opposed to a labor of, well, I hope this makes me some money.
Oh yeah. Well, there aren't many writers that make a lot of money, not to be discouraging, a discouraging voice here. So no, we don't write for that. We write for a love of story. We write because we're sort of compelled to. We write because it's what fulfills us. So I think that's the best reason to write, and perhaps the only reason to write.
Yeah, I agree. So Terry, if somebody wants to, we've shown off all of your books. They're amazing
Thank
books. I've
you.
read them. My family's read them. I bought them as presents for my family. And if somebody wanted to find out more about your books and what you're doing and when you're doing readings, what can they do?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to terryfallis.com. And look at that right on cue. Scott puts up the URL. Everything you can find there. And in fact, you can even listen to the podcasts of my early novels on the website, or you can certainly find them all on iTunes. I kind of sold out, Scott, in the last two novels because Penguin Random House in Canada started their own audiobook division. So I haven't podcast my last two novels. I've actually recorded the actual audiobook, but they aren't free. You have to pay for that.
So did you do the recording or did you get a voice
No,
actor?
I've done the recordings for the official audiobook for both my last two novels, Albatross and Operation Angus.
Awesome.
It's lots of fun.
And I think it's so neat when you, or in other audiobooks, when it's the author that does the reading as opposed to I've listened to audiobooks that have voice actors and they sound like voice actors.
Yes. Yeah, they may have great voices, but they aren't always sure what the author meant. But I can tell exactly how to punctuate that sentence I'm reading, or what to emphasize and what to, let my voice trail off on. So, because I wrote it, so it's a bit easier for me.
Oh, so do you ever find, like, if you go back and as you're rereading, and maybe this is in the creation process, or maybe it's after it's published, and you find some meanings in there that you didn't realize you put in?
Oh yeah, I'm always finding things that I'd forgotten about, or somebody else will interpret something that I wrote in a way that I hadn't really thought of. And this happens sometimes at at Writers Festival, someone will put up their hand and say, yes, did you mean to philosophically imply blah, blah, blah? And were you making a connection with this theory of da, 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 da? And I usually think from it and go, why, yes, I was thinking of that. But yeah, it happens quite often. I own up to it when it's true and when it's not true. But yeah, there probably are some meanings. Some of them might be subconscious. Others were intended, but I've forgotten about 8 books later. But yeah, that happens. It does happen.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Terry. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share your books with us and your knowledge.
My pleasure, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.